Now your Bibles are open to Ecclesiastes 4 and verse number 6. On the broadcast yesterday, I was pointing out how Solomon tries to pull a reasonable area of balance in this matter of he said, I saw the travail in every right work. I considered all travail in every right work. And then counterbalanced against the honest and earnest industry and industrious labor of a man, we have a fool. And the counterbalance of that is in verse number 5, the fool foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh. Over a very short period of time, he will consume everything that has been laid aside for him, everything that's been put up in store, all of the stockpile, everything will become consumed. So how are we to counterbalance, as it were? On the one hand, we have a workaholic. And on the other hand, we have a slothful individual that wouldn't take a position, let alone a job. My grandfather used to say that there are some people that are so lazy, they wouldn't take a job in a pie factory tasting pies. Well, I think he's right about that, and we have people in society that are that way today. On occasion, we find out about somebody that wins the lottery, and that money, that infusion of money, they blow through it, and it destroys their life. We hear occasionally about trust fund children that are born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and they never have had to work and labor, and they blow through their inheritance, and after a while the inheritance is all gone. So how do we counterbalance these two verses? And I considered all travail in every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. Then on the other hand, I have the man at the other end of the spectrum, the fool foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh. Now it is obvious that neither the man that is involved in every right work nor the fool are going to be able to take anything with them. Naked came I into the world, and naked I shall leave this world. So how are these two things to be counterbalanced, the one against the other? And I think we find that in Solomon's statement in verse number 6. Better is an handful with quietness. Better is an handful with quietness. Now it's interesting that the King James text uses this word handful, and I believe the King James text to be without error. My position is the King James Bible is a perfect document, and I use only the King James Bible in my preaching and in my work here at the radio mic. A handful. Now a handful is simply, and this may be an oversimplification, but a handful is as much as the hand will grasp or contain. A handful, we read in the book of Ruth, where Ruth the Moabitess, Boaz dropped handfuls of purpose. And when she went home to Naomi, she had an abundance. She had sufficient for them to eat. There is no place in the Bible where I find a vow of poverty to be morally or spiritually advantageous. There are some people that say, I'm poor and I'm proud of it, and I'm more spiritual than you because I drive an older car than you, and I live in a smaller house than you live in, and that makes me more spiritual than you. I never read a verse like that in the Bible at all. The handful here qualified with quietness. Now, there is labor in all things, and a man that will not eat, the Apostle Paul said, is worse than an infidel that has denied the faith. A man that is too sorry, as I read back in verse number 5, the fool foldeth his hands and eateth himself. I have run into people before, and they've made the comment, well, Brother Ben, I'm just laid back. I'm just laid back. And when I observe their life, they're not laid back, they're lazy, L-A-Z-Y. It's not that they're laid back, it's that they are lazy individuals. The handful here would be a sufficient amount. I have a desire in my own life to be comfortable in my livelihood, and I think everyone listening to the Bright Spot Hour would have a desire to be able to be comfortable in your life. And many people in the United States, if this land of opportunity that we live in, if you can't labor over the course of your life to such a degree that you can become comfortable in your life and comfortable in what you have, you just have wasted your time. You've not invested your life efficiently and actively to cause you to reach a position of where you're comfortable. When I say that now, I ate this morning, and I'll be able to eat breakfast tomorrow morning, and I'll be able to eat supper this evening, and I have a place to lay my head, and I paid my power bill last month, and the lights are on at my house, and I have enjoyed quietness. I have labored diligently. I've worked 70-hour weeks, and I have been faithful in the ministry, and I've been faithful in my secular work, and God has blessed me. I've been faithful in my tithe and faithful in my missions giving, and God has honored that today I have a handful. I have sufficient. I have enough, and I don't have the money to go buy a plantation. I don't have the money to go buy a house in Martha's Vineyard, not at all. But my bills are paid, and I have money sufficient to pay the bills next month. Quietness can be defined as a state of rest or stillness. It could be calm and tranquility. There is something to be said for the honest and earnest labor of a man or a woman, a man especially, providing for his family. And in that labor, he is honest and diligent to the degree that he arrives at a point in his life where he has enough. I have enough. I have enough. I have a handful. I have all my hands can hold. And that is not defined as greed. That is not defined as Solomon said back in verse number 4, I considered all travail in every right work, and a man is envied of his neighbor, but rather it is having a sufficient amount. When my grandchildren say, Papa, I want something to eat, I want to be in a position to feed them, to stop by the hamburger place and get them a hamburger and a Coca-Cola, or stop by the hot dog stand and buy them a hot dog. And when Christmas time comes, I want to have sufficient to be able to buy gifts for my family, and I've discovered that they just like it just as well if you just give them money, and I want to be able to do that and be in a position to do that. Better is an handful. On the one hand, we have the workaholic who devotes his whole life to gaining, acquiring, getting, building bigger, building greater, having more and more and more. After a while, you have more than your hands can hold. You can't keep up with everything you've acquired. On the other hand, we have the fool that wouldn't strike a lick at anything. He foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh. And the counterbalance that Solomon says here, rather than the man that is occupied in all travail, and then the sluggard who folds his hands together and won't strike a lick at anything, better is an handful with quietness. What good is the acquisition of a superabundance of things and a superabundance of stuff, like the people that we see on the televisions, the Kardashians and the other famous people that are uber wealthy, and they're always arguing and they're always angry. There is no calm or tranquility. They're always in the divorce court, or they're occupied in some wild perversion, or their offspring has been arrested for DUI or drug trafficking, or they're in and out of drug rehab all the time. Nothing but mayhem and confusion and all kind of wickedness and sin. Solomon says here it's better to have a handful. It is better to have what my hands can hold, to have a sufficient amount, to have enough, and to have quietness. My wife and I are not at war with each other. I'm not at war with my children, and I'm not at war with my grandchildren. My wife has been by the office today as I'm recording this broadcast. My wife has been by the office twice with my granddaughter. My son has been by the office today, and I've spent some time with him, and he's helped me move furniture around. And I plan to go home this evening, and I plan to have a wonderful time of fellowship with whoever's there. My daughter, my grandson, my wife, whoever is there. Better is a handful with quietness. To be in a state of quietness is for you and me to be free from agitation, to not be aggravated, to have calmness and coolness in our home. My desire is for me to be to have a state of freedom from disturbance. When I go home and shut the door behind me and I go in with my wife and my children and grandchildren, I want to be free from disorder. I want to be free from commotion. I want an atmosphere that is peace and tranquility. I want there to be quietness in my home and quietness in Greenville County and quietness in my neighborhood, you see. Better is an handful with quietness than both hands full to have more than you can use. But in the midst of that, you have travail and vexation of spirit. And we dealt with the matter of travail and vexation of spirit. Sometimes you arrive at a point in life when it's just not worth the energy to try to keep up with all of these two handfuls of things that we have tried to acquire. And we're better off just to have one handful and to be able to keep up with that and to have peace and calm and tranquility. Now tomorrow my grandfather will be here by way of recording, and then the Lord willing on Monday, the 16th of January, I'll be back and we'll continue by the grace of God in these wonderful scriptures.
Check out the website at thebrightspothour.com. Write Dr. Carver at Post Office Box 4,